4 decades after the Cold War ended, you have to ask, are America's defenses actually ready? Ready to face 2 nuclear superpowers? Or are we, frankly, dangerously unprepared? Welcome to the Deep Dive. You've sent us, quite a stack of sources this time, all looking hard at U.S. national security, the defense budget for fiscal year 2025, and these growing global threats. China, Russia, they're front and center. And the core message running through all this, it's pretty stark. It argues America's defense posture needs a radical and immediate overhaul, like right now, to guarantee security, to maintain deterrence. So our mission today is to give you the shortcut through all this material. We're going to unpack the key arguments, both strategic and fiscal, that are driving this demand for a major defense budget reset. We'll explore why these critics say our current military spending priorities are putting the nation at risk, and we'll look at what specific new peace through strength initiatives they're championing to close what they see as a really massive deterrence gap.
And this isn't just theory, This discussion is happening because things are moving fast. The need to modernize deterrence, it's prompted immediate action. Just recently, for example, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced this revolutionary Golden Dome system. It's a space-based missile defense shield.
Okay.
And this is positioned as a direct, necessary response to the fact that both China and Russia have operationalized advanced hypersonic weapons. These are glide vehicles that, they can potentially defeat our current defenses.
Right.
The sources we looked at, they explicitly frame Golden Dome as the 21st century version of Reagan's SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative. The goal is to reverse decades of what they call complacency and build this ultimate multi-layered shield.
And the focus seems very specific geographically.
Oh, absolutely. It's squarely on the Pacific. China is clearly identified in these documents as the primary pacing challenge. And the U.S. is signaling a pretty dramatic shift in force posture out there in the Indo-Pacific. We're seeing deployments of new hard-to-track systems, things like the Nemesis launcher, the mobile Typhoon rocket launcher.
Yeah.
Going to places like the Philippines.
Putting them right there.
Exactly. These are long-range mobile missile systems. They're specifically designed to deny Chinese assets freedom of movement, within those restricted island chains. It's projecting force right onto Beijing's doorstep.
Okay, let's step back for a second. Let's talk about the bedrock strategy, the existential question.
Yeah.
Nuclear deterrence. For decades, stability, such as it was built on MAD, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mutually assured destruction.
That's right. MAD. It sounds terrifying, and it was, but it worked on a simple, grim logic. Any nuclear attack guarantees total annihilation for both sides. That threat, that mutual suicide pact, basically guided doctrine for decades.
But the argument now is that MAD is, broken.
It's obsolete. That's the word used. The sources point out we're now in a great power confrontation with a really complex 2+2 threat environment.
2+2.
Yeah, meaning not just peer competitors like China and Russia, but also rogue states like Iran and North Korea, all pursuing nuclear capabilities. You've got China accelerating its nuclear program faster than anyone in history. Russia uses nuclear threats, almost daily as coercion.
So MAD doesn't work if an adversary thinks they can maybe win or at least gain something conventionally using a nuclear threat.
Exactly. It's no longer sufficient when they believe they can use nuclear threats to get advantages on the ground.
And when you look at the numbers presented on our current defenses, it seems pretty alarming. Really highlights the gap, doesn't it?
It's a frightening picture, frankly. Reagan's original SDI vision, that called for over 1,000 interceptors. Land, space, the works.
1,000. And today?
Today, our Homeland missile defense relies on just 44. 44 ground-based interceptors, GBIs, mostly sitting in Alaska and California. And crucially, we have 0 operational interceptors deployed in space right now.
0 in space. Against new threats like hypersonics that can maneuver around existing systems, that's a monumental gap.
It is.
So how does Golden Dome supposedly fix this? How does it fundamentally change the defense geometry?
Golden Dome really represents a major strategic shift. It's moving towards what they call a strategy of denial. The core idea isn't just threatening retaliation anymore. It's being able to actually shoot down incoming missiles.
Denial, not just deterrence through punishment.
Precisely. Golden Dome is presented as the fix. It's designed as this comprehensive, multi-layered shield against advanced threats. And the truly revolutionary part is the space-based layer.
Good.
We're talking potentially thousands of network satellites, maybe with kinetic weapons, maybe directed energy, capable of tracking and hitting missiles in their boost phase, right after launch when they're slowest and most vulnerable.
Regardless of where they're launched from.
Exactly. A global shield, essentially.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and unpack the budget critique. The argument here, from these conservative sources, is that this readiness gap isn't just strategic. It's a result of, well, fiscal mismanagement. That the Pentagon is too focused on future tech, not present lethality.
That's absolutely the core of the conservative critique, yes. They point to the numbers, the fiscal stats, and see a severe imbalance. Take fiscal year 2023. The DoD authorized $140 billion for research, development, test, and evaluation RD&E.
Oh, yeah, $140 billion.
Compare that to $167 billion for actual procurement, buying the ships, planes, weapons we supposedly need now.
So RDT&E spending was what percentage of procurement?
It works out to about 84%. That's the striking figure. RDT&E spending was almost as much as procurement spending. Critics argue the Pentagon is acting like a giant research lab, spending 84 cents developing something for the future for every dollar they spend buying and fielding proven lethal weapons today.
So the focus on the force of 2035 is hurting the force of 2025.
That's precisely the argument. It's actively detracting from fielding the equipment and, crucially, the munitions needed for today's security challenges.
Okay, so if that's the diagnosis, the recommended cure seems pretty radical. Cut that generalized R&D and pump the money straight into procurement. Ships, planes, ammo.
Immediately. That's the call. Buy what works now. And crucially, all that spending needs to be laser-focused on the #1 strategic threat.
Which these sources identify unequivocally as China.
Exactly. Strategy dictates spending, not the other way around. China is the designated pacing threat, and a potential Taiwan invasion is the pacing scenario. This demands a serious shift, what they call the Indo-Pacific pivot.
Meaning
Meaning you have to physically move funding, equipment, personnel away from other theaters, specifically Europe, and give those resources to U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Indo-PACOM.
But pulling forces and funding from Europe? That raises huge questions about NATO, doesn't it? This strategy seems to demand our European allies really step up.
It puts, intense political pressure on Washington to make Europe take more responsibility. European NATO countries, the argument goes, must take primary responsibility for their own conventional defense. They need to lead the military aid efforts for Ukraine.
And spend more?
Significantly more. The strategists argue they need to aim for at least 3% of their GDP on defense, not just the 2% minimum, which many still aren't even meeting. This is seen as essential to free up U.S. forces and, importantly, our finite weapons stockpiles for the China threat. The core idea is we can't be overextended everywhere if we need to focus on denying China.
Okay, let's talk about those stockpiles. If the budget focus has been on the future, what state does that leave our current arsenal in? The numbers you mentioned on munitions. They sound really worrying. Just how ready are we for a high-intensity fight tomorrow?
The statistics presented paint a picture of profound deficit. Real insufficiency across the board. Take air-to-air combat. The U.S. inventory of critical missiles like Sidewinders, AMRAAMs, it totals maybe 20,000 non-training missiles, maximum.
20,000 sounds like a lot, maybe.
Not when you consider China alone operates over 3,000 military aircraft. In a high-attrition conflict, where you might need multiple shots per kill, that inventory gets used up incredibly fast. It's described as woefully inadequate.
And for the Navy. Especially thinking about a vast Pacific theater.
Equally concerning, according to these sources, fewer than 400 Mk-48 torpedoes for the entire attack submarine fleet. That number has to cover training, testing, and potential wartime losses. It suggests our subs are operating on fumes, munitions-wise.
Wow.
And then there's the Tomahawk land attack missiles, the TLAMs, about 4,000 estimated in the arsenal. That number barely exceeds the total number of vertical launch system cells, the VLS tubes, across the entire U.S. fleet. Meaning the Navy can essentially fire one volley, maybe one shot per tube, and then they're effectively out of long-range cruise missiles. That's the implication.
So, if the industrial base isn't producing fast enough now, what's the proposed quick fix for this munitions crisis?
The fix requires the government to behave like a serious, reliable customer. The recommendation is first, dramatically increase procurement orders for weapons critical to the Indo-Pacific. Things like LRAs-MMs, those are long-range anti-ship missiles, and SM-6s, which are versatile air defense interceptors.
Okay, buy more. But how do you get industry to ramp up production?
That's the second part. Use multi-year procurement authorities, MYP. This tells the defense industrial base, we're committed to buying this quantity over several years. It gives them the confidence to invest in expanding their factories, hiring workers, ramping up production capacity without fearing the government will just cancel the order next year. It sends a strong, sustained demand signal.
Makes sense. And this push for expansion isn't just conventional, right? The nuclear arsenal is also flagged as needing immediate attention.
That's right. The current nuclear modernization program, things like the new Sentinel ICBM and Columbia-class submarines, it's described as necessary but insufficient.
Insufficient.
Yes, because Russia and China are expanding their arsenals so rapidly now. So immediate actions are called for. Things like uploading additional warheads onto our existing Minuteman, the third ICBMs. They were originally designed to carry up to 3 warheads each. The proposal is to load them back up.
Reversing past treaty limitations.
Essentially, yes. And similarly, the Navy should reopen the 4 missile tubes on each Ohio-class submarine that were previously shuttered to comply with the now-defunct New START treaty limits.
And looking further ahead.
Looking ahead, there's a major production goal set. The National Nuclear Security Administration, the NNSA, must be producing no fewer than 200 operationally deployable new nuclear warheads every year by 2035 at the latest. This is seen as crucial for maintaining a credible deterrent long-term.
Okay, let's shift to the people side of this. All this focus on lethality, strength. What does it mean for the service members, especially when we know there's a major national recruiting crisis happening right now?
Yeah.
That itself is a readiness issue.
Absolutely. The recruiting crisis is complex. The sources point to several factors: a declining sense of patriotism, fewer young Americans even qualifying for service, and importantly, a lot of concern raised in this material about the politicization of the military.
And qualification issues are stark, aren't they?
They are. It's hard to believe, but basic physical health is a huge barrier. Obesity is cited as a top medically disqualifying condition, and projections suggest it could affect nearly a quarter, maybe 24.2% of recruitment age Americans by 2030.
Now, these sources get pretty specific and quite sharp in their critique of the military's internal culture. Can you lay out what these conservative strategists argue is driving down morale and hurting recruitment?
Yeah, the material we reviewed argues very strongly that the Department of Defense is hurting readiness by focusing too much on what they term non-mission critical social issues. The argument is that the military's absolute top priority must be lethality and that it is not supposed to be a social laboratory.
And they give specific examples.
They do. The critique specifically mentions service members being subjected to mandatory training sessions on, what the strategists call inane concepts such as the correct use of personal pronouns, and also on left-wing ideological concepts with their roots in the Marxist tenets of critical race theory.
And the connection to readiness and recruitment.
The argument presented is that this kind of focus is divisive, it's demoralizing, it distracts from the core warfighting mission, and crucially, it actively contributes to the recruiting crisis by alienating potential recruits and their families who don't share those views.
So the recommendation boiling out of that critique is fundamentally about depoliticizing the DoD to restore trust and help fix recruiting alongside practical changes.
That's the core action item, yes, depoliticization. This includes practical steps like ensuring all physical fitness tests are gender neutral, arguing that maintains genuine readiness standards for demanding combat roles.
But it's not just about cutting or critiquing internal policies, right?
Yeah.
There's also mention of support for troops.
That's true. It's not all negative. The budget recommendations also specifically call for reallocating $400 million to directly improve housing conditions for service members and their families. To address these awful reported problems like mold, sewage issues, pest infestation. So there's an element of needing to invest properly in the troops we do have, restoring a sense of purpose, while also cutting what's seen as bureaucratic bloat and waste.
Okay, so zooming out one last time. We've really unpacked a clear, strategically driven case here for a national security reset. It's about prioritizing China, shifting spending dramatically from future R&D to buying weapons now, expanding the nuclear arsenal significantly, and building those crucial layered missile defenses like Golden Dome.
Right. The core message woven through all these arguments is that decades of perceived complacency have created this massive deterrence gap. And that gap must be closed urgently to guarantee U.S. sovereignty and security.
It sounds like a fundamental shift away from just relying on the threat of retaliation.
Exactly. It's about moving away from that Cold War MAD framework towards a position of undeniable strength. The goal is to be able to deny adversaries their objectives, whether through conventional aggression or nuclear blackmail.
Which brings us right back to that stark number you mentioned at the start. The U.S. today relies on just 44 ground-based interceptors to defend the entire homeland, against missile threats from peer nations like Russia and the rapidly growing Chinese arsenal. So the final provocative question these sources leave us with is this. Can America continue to rely on the decades-old, frankly terrifying calculus of mutually assured destruction? Or is the reality of modern hypersonics and facing two nuclear peers simultaneously finally forcing our hand, forcing us to adopt a comprehensive strategy of denial and actually build that ultimate shield to guarantee our security? That seems to be the central question driving every defense decision right now.